It's so good to see you on this beautiful day where whenever it's a nice day, I'm thinking, oh, I've got lots of competition out there. It's beautiful and sunny and such. But I'm so glad you could join me for our little journey, our sojourn to Southern Utah for an hour and a half this morning. Um, I'll just introduce myself, even though I see a lot of familiar names. So I'm glad to see you guys again. My name is Judy Okun, and I'm down in Cherry Hill today. That's where I live. And I teach at Westchester University in Southern PA. It's just south of, about half an hour south of Philly in the geography department. And I typically teach classes on world geography, but my personal love is the American West. And if I have to get even more specific than that, Utah, that is my place. That's my special place that I try to get to as often as I can. And I started traveling there with my family back when I was a kid, and I fell in love with it, especially southern Utah, but all of Utah. You can't go wrong in Utah, really, literally any place. And since then, I probably have been to the state, I don't know, 15 times or so. And I just love to share my enthusiasm for it. So the first thing I'd like to do is find out, where you who has been out west and that type of thing. Um, and also I should mention we have a small enough group that you don't have to worry about formalities of like putting the raise hand up if you want to talk or anything like that. You can just unmute and just speak up if you want to ask a question or not. The other thing you can do if you're more comfortable with it is use the chat and type your question or your comment or your answer in, whatever the case may be. So we're kind of free flowing here. It's the joy of being in a smaller group where we can get a little bit more up close and personal. So with that said, and I'm assuming that everybody knows how to unmute and everyone knows how to use the chat at this point because we're probably all old pros at using Zoom already. I want to ask you this question. What is the furthest west you have ever traveled in the US?
California.
All right, so I'm hearing California
California,
and
yes.
California. Okay.
Hawaii.
Okay, that's so west that maybe it's even getting east already, right?
Not quite east.
Not quite, but very, very close, right? Almost at
Yep.
the international date line. Where else? All right, I see a Hawaii, a California in the chat. Okay, so we have people who have definitely gone west. Um, Now I want to ask you if you've been to Utah. How many people here have been to Utah before? You can just say
Yeah,
you raise your
I
hand
have.
or yes. Okay, so Rose has, I see
Doug,
that
Doug
Brill
has.
has. Okay, Kristen, Doug, you have.
Yes.
Okay. And I haven't heard from everybody, but that's quite a few people that have been there. And sometimes Utah's a little bit off the beaten track because people tend to go to California, right? They tend to go even to Alaska, but they some and Arizona because of the Grand Canyon, but sometimes they miss that amazing state. Um, I know lots of people who visit Sedona, which is beautiful. Probably lots of us have seen Sedona. It's lovely, but they haven't heard of some of the places in Utah that to me are at least as spectacular as Sedona. So I think Sedona is really good at marketing. And Utah's kind of, in some ways, it used to be more of a hidden gem, but it's getting more and more popular now. In fact, I was in Zion National Park last summer and I was just blown away by the crowds. It used
Oh,
to be
really?
people going there. But and this was not even in the height of the summertime. It was in the middle of May. It was before Memorial Day, and it was insane. And
Oh,
I think part of the reason for that is that when COVID came about, people who may have normally gone to Europe or other places overseas, suddenly they started focusing on places closer to home. And this huge popularity began with our very special Southern Utah National Park. So that's a bit of controversy going on, that the parks are getting to be, sort of loved to the point that the Park Service has had to manage the crowds to a certain degree. And one of the big debates going on is, should the parks limit how many people come into the parks? Should the Park Service limit the number of people who can come into the parks each day? And Arches National Park decided to do that a couple of years ago. I don't know if anyone has been there and experienced that, but you need to reserve a slot before you go. And that goes on until 4 in the afternoon. And at 4, they open the gates. But before that, you have to have a reservation to get in. There are people who say they love it because now the parks are more open and such, but there are others who absolutely are opposed to it and say, hey, these are our public lands, and don't make this like Disneyland where you have to have a time ticket or something like that. So these are just some of the interesting things swirling around when it comes to some of our more popular natural sites in the US. And by the way, if you have any comments at any point, please throw them in. If you have anything you want to say about, any of this. And okay, so Kirsten, you're going there in a few weeks. Yes. So if you're going to, I believe it's just Arches at this point, make sure that you look at the website so you make an advance reservation. What I did when I was there was I said, I don't know exactly when I'm going to be there. I'm kind of like fast and loose. We may go here, we may go there. And I like the spontaneity sometimes of just coming and going. So we didn't make a reservation. And instead we just went at 4 o'clock, which was fine. It was totally fine. There's so much to do in all of those areas that I was plenty busy until 4 o'clock, and then we headed into the park, and that's when the gate is open. So you can, kind of work it whichever way works for you. So, all right. So what I want to do is take a look at a map to give us kind of the big picture of that region. And then after that, I'm going to switch into a PowerPoint. So let's do that. So I'm going into the share screen, and we tested this out before. So with any luck, it's going to work. Let's see what happens. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see this. It looks good at my end. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to show you the other thing. So I'm going to get out of this. We'll get back to that. And I'm going into the share screen to this very favorite website of mine. And this, if you've been in classes with me before, you may have seen this. This is called windy.com, and it's a wonderful way to explore the world from your comfortable air-conditioned house, especially this time of the year when I'm starting to put the air conditioning on. And you can choose different layers for the things that you want to look at. I just have it chosen right now for temperature. So you can look at wind, you can look at all kinds of things. Temperature will do. The other thing I have on here are webcams. So you can choose webcams somewhere over there. And that's pretty cool too. So you can take peeks at places that you might be interested in observing. So looking at the big picture, here we are, home sweet home, our big, beautiful grand country, which is, about 3,000 miles across. And somewhere along the way, on your way to, let's say, to California, you can bump into this amazing state, which is probably about 2,500 miles from us. And let's see what's going on there right now. I'm going to just look at a few webcams really quickly. This looks like it's right at the border of Arizona and Utah. And yeah, this can give us a feel for southern Utah. So this is actually half Arizona and half Utah. I believe the view is in Utah looking out into Arizona. And yeah, it conveys lots of adjectives, probably of beauty and vastness for many people. And let's take a look over here. This looks like it's in the Monument Valley area. Yes, Monument Valley, which actually is mainly in Utah. It's associated with Arizona, but a lot of the monument, the actual pinnacles are in Utah. It's that the Navajo reservation is in Arizona. So it's somewhat claims Navajo Valley as its Monument Valley as its own, but it actually is in Utah. So let's take a look at that. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. All right. So let's see what else. I'm going to go up a little bit further. This looks like it's a little bit north of Moab and Arches. Actually, no, I'm wrong. San Juan County is a little bit south. And again, you get the feel for this part of the country. So if you had to put in one word, an adjective for what you're seeing when you look at any of these views, what are some of the things? Incredible website. I
Well,
agree.
watch this with me. This is a lecture on southern Utah
Yes,
through the library. Judy Okun.
yes, that's me. And that's what we're going to be focused on. Um, okay, dry. Yes, absolutely. Dry is one of the things that I would say too. This area is what we would consider to be semi-arid. I'm wondering if we can get everybody muted because somebody seems not to be, and there's a little bit of background noise. So that would be great. Thank you. Yeah, this is a semi-arid area, so it's not quite desert the way we would consider, I don't know, parts of maybe southern Arizona. It gets a bit more rainfall than that, but it still is an area that has very sparse amounts of rainfall. And because of that, that's part of what gives it the beauty that it has, that we actually get to see the geology. We see what's going on, and beyond that, because all of the rock is exposed, it's subject to tremendous amounts of erosion. And so if you think of where we are, we've got lots of rainfall. We have trees that are absorbing a lot of the rainfall, trees that are protecting the soil, et cetera. We're not going to have the same degree of the type of erosion that this part of the country has. So that's one of the big differences that go on. Okay, so I'm going to come out of here, but definitely enjoy this website when you have the chance. You'll love it. There's so much to explore here. So I'm coming out of here now, and I'm going to go into my PowerPoint. And I'm checking every now and then the chat. And again, if you have anything you want to say, you can also just share it with us without even putting it into the chat. So here's my website, my PowerPoint, and I'm just going to get this into, hang on a second, the slideshow. So I'm going into slideshow, and I'm going to the current slide. All right, so we are in southern Utah, a land unparalleled. And let's take a look at this. Oh, by the way, I'm going to go back for a second. So again, I'm Judy Okun. And if you want to get in touch with me, if you have any questions about anything we talked about, or if you have other ideas for classes, whatever it is, my email is pretty basic. It's just judyokun1@gmail. So feel free to get in touch with me at any point. Okay, onward. So let's take a look at some of the physiographic regions of North America, particularly the area that we're going to be looking at. And one of the prominent features in this part of the country are the Rockies. The Rockies actually extend all the way up to Alaska. So this whole band is Rockies. Um, if we go a little bit to the west of that area, we get to this region that we call Basin and Plateau. Here's the Four Corners region, and southern Utah would be right over here. So it's very close to the Rockies, but not quite the Rockies. Instead, it's in an area that has low basins and high plateaus. Most of southern Utah is in plateau part of this region, and the plateau is called the Colorado Plateau. Some of the most scenic places in the United States are in this region called the Colorado Plateau, in my opinion, at least. I mean, there's lots of scenery and such, but this particularly, eroded scenic area of Utah is the Colorado Plateau. So that's what we have going on over here. Let's take a look And stop me if you have any questions at anything that you see along the way. One of the things I want to mention, by the way, before I go on, is that the reason why the Rockies are here, which is an odd place for a mountain range to be, usually they're on the edge of a continent because there was some sort of a crash that took place between two continents. And we have that going on right through New Jersey, where Africa, which is an amazing thought, actually collided with North America millions of years ago, and that created the Appalachians along the edge over here. So what the heck is going on here that the Rockies are in, kind of like a third of the way into North America? So here's the story. There was a tremendous plate that existed where the Pacific plate is today. The Pacific plate expanded and pushed at that other plate, and it actually made it slide underneath North America. There are only tiny bits of that giant plate that still stick out today. One part is up here in the Pacific Northwest. So as that plate is sliding underneath North America, it's creating some interesting, rises and drops and such. And eventually, the edge of that plate reaches here where it pushes up this mountain range. And you can imagine how big this plate is, that the mountains go all the way over here. So today, most of that plate is gone. It's underneath North America, but it helped to create lots of the features that we have today. So that's just a little bit of the tale of the basin and plateau, and also the mountains that exist in a very strange area, kind of in the middle of the country. And stop me if you have any questions on stuff as we go along. So let's take a look at this area in a little bit more detail. Pardon the fuzzy pictures. These are the best I could find on this. But here's the Colorado Plateau. Here are the Rockies. And here is that area, an area that we call the Great Basin. So we're in this basin and the plateau. So this would be the lower area. And here is the area that rose up that we call the Colorado Plateau. So let's see what's going to be going on. I'm going to get back to that basin idea in a little bit, but let's look at some of the, kind of human geography of this part of the country. So this is a map that's going to show population. And it's no surprise that southern Utah is not going to be densely populated, because you guys said it right away. It's an area with little vegetation, it's very dry, and where the country starts having rainfall that drops below 20 inches a year, that's when population starts to really drop, because it would just be such an effort to try to bring enough water in to support a big population. So literally through the middle of the country, basically, that's where we see population really starting to drop off. So this area is going to be sparsely populated with lots of wilderness, lots of open areas, which is quite a relief considering where we're coming from, for goodness sakes. Look at this. So yeah, what a nice contrast that we have this occurring in the United States as well. Okay, and let's look at a few other things here. So by road, how would we get to this part of the country? Well, if I was leaving New Jersey, I would probably want to take 76 to 70. So I would be taking Interstate 70, and it's going through the Midwest, it's going through Kansas and Tornado Alley and all of these really cool things. And then we're going to get to the Rockies, and here's 70. And just about over here, if I wanted to go down to Arches, I would take a side road, 191, to take me to Arches. So Arches, Moab, Canyonlands would be down here. If I wanted to go to Zion National Park, I would continue on, and then where 70 ends and it meets up with 15, I would go down, and Zion would be right around here. And by the way, I find it interesting that the interstate is not going all the way across, because look at some of the others, like 80. 80 starts at the GWB, right? George Washington Bridge, and it's going all the way across to get to Is that Portland or does it? Yes, I guess it stops at, no, I think it stops San Francisco. There we go, San Francisco. And 90 is going to go all the way to Seattle. But 70, because of the terrain being as tough as it is in southern Utah, and because there really are no big cities to connect over here at all, it's gonna stop. It just stops, and you have to either go north or south. So this in and of itself tells me something about the character of this area. It is wild. It is very rough land in many ways. In fact, I also want to throw into the mix that just about, I'm looking and getting my bearings here for a minute. 15. Okay. So this area over here, there's a town called Kanab, Kanab. Kanab is right on the outskirts of a huge national monument called Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, which was designated during the Clinton administration. This thing is massive. And one of the things that's absolutely crazy about this is that it was the last place in the United States to be fully surveyed outside of Alaska. So we've got Alaska, which of course is going to take a long time, and it's fairly recent that we really have mapped it in detail. But the other place, the place in the lower 48, that's the last, is going to be right over here. So wow, this must be something, must be absolutely something land-wise in order for it to be as inaccessible as it is. Okay, anybody have any questions or comments so far? Feel free to flag me down, because otherwise I could be talking about this stuff quite a bit. What route would you suggest from Bryce to Moab? Okay, so this isn't the greatest map for it because we can get more detail, but let's take a look. So the key here is to look for Las Vegas. So when last time I went there and I didn't have time to drive, so we flew into Las Vegas because Las Vegas to Zion is only like an hour and a half. So Zion would be right around here in this general area. To get from Zion to Bryce, you would cut through, you could take 15 a little bit, and then you would cut through some really scenic areas like where Cedar City is without getting into too much detail. And from there, you can continue on to Bryce Canyon. And from Bryce Canyon, and the road, it doesn't show that road here, from Bryce Canyon, you would continue on Highway 12, which is absurdly scenic. It's unbelievably scenic. And from 12, you could get to Moab. So for anyone who's thinking of doing a road trip in that area, my suggestion would be, and this holds true for anywhere in the US, try and get off the interstates, although they're beautiful too there. It's not like driving on the New Jersey Turnpike, right? Um, Instead, you're get onto this to the federal roads if you can. And one of the beautiful roads, I'm going to type a couple in. One of the amazing roads is 191, which goes into, it's one of the roads that will go into Moab. Another is 128, which goes by Moab. And as I mentioned before, 12. 12 is considered like one of these all-American scenic roads, and it absolutely earns the title. Let's see, I've read that 12 has some tight turns. Yes, it's not horrible though. I mean, if I could drive it, a Brooklyn girl who lives in Cherry Hill, it's not that bad. There are roads that are going to be a lot worse than that once you get up into the mountains. 12 is great. Who's been on 12? Has anyone else been on 12 ever? It's amazing. Maybe we'll get to look at some pictures of that after. So those would be some of my hot tips: 191, 128, and 12. If you take a look at a map of those, they're all in the area of Zion to Bryce to Moab. Sure, absolutely. At your service with any travel tips. I love it. All right, so let's take a look at what else we've got here. So domestic migration, net domestic migration. So basically, where are people moving to in the United States? And or where are they shifting to? And this is very interesting. If you look at the Four Corners region, and expand it out, well, there's not that much going on here. In fact, it looks like some people may be moving out. But if we shift over to the southwestern part of Utah, there is a huge influx of people moving in particular to a town called St. George. St. George is right on 15. It was a Mormon settlement back in the 1840s, 1850s, and it's really grown into a pretty major community. It has probably about 250,000 people already. One of the interesting things about this part of Utah is that it's actually called the Dixie of Utah because it has a very warm climate compared to the rest of the state. If you drive around St. George, you will see palm trees, which is something people don't associate with Utah all that much. And the palm trees continue. It's fascinating to keep watch of them. They continue as you go a little bit north, and then suddenly you don't see them anymore as you're going towards Zion National Park because the elevation get changes, it gets a little cooler, and that's the end of the palm trees. But in this little pocket where you can see the population shift going on, and it's truly growing, and that partially is because this area has really hot, sunny, nice weather, similar to Las Vegas. It's only like an hour-ish away from Las Vegas, so it's kind of that type of climate for people who are looking for that. Okay, so anybody have any other questions of this on this map? I'm going to do a quick look at New Jersey. I can't help but look, and it looks like we're kind of static. We're not where the crowds are going to, but they certainly, in some cases, are shifting to some of these areas over here. Very interesting. Okay, so let's look at the precipitation map. Yep, so as I had mentioned before, look how precipitation is going to drop off. It's going to be about 20 inches or less once you go past this line over here. So if we look at southern Utah, yes, it is quite dry. It's very, very dry. Not quite, as I had mentioned, a desert. True deserts would be down here into southern Arizona and some parts of Nevada and Southern California. But it is dry enough that we're going to get those types of landscapes that we looked at before. And just to zero in, yeah, it is dry. It is dry except along this range over here, which is the Wasatch Range. And that would be kind of a band of mountains that collect more moisture by Salt Lake City and extending down a little bit. Okay, let's go on. All right, so we looked at the Colorado Plateau a little bit before. We talked a little bit about that. Let's look at the neighboring area a little bit. So this, just to show you a cross-section of the Colorado Plateau. So the Grand Canyon would be down here. The Colorado Plateau, this is considered to be the beginning of it geologically. And you can see that there are different layers of it as you extend on. And Zion Canyon is over here. And one of the highest areas of the Colorado Plateau would be Bryce Canyon. And for that reason, Bryce Canyon gets very cold in the wintertime, much colder than Zion. It's about 8,000 feet up. So cold and snowy, which gives it a very special look as well. All right, let's keep going on. And if you have any questions, please stop me. This is a big one. This is something that really shows a big difference between the Western US and the Eastern US. Who owns the West? Federal land as a percentage of total state land area. So it's showing how much land in Western states the federal government controls. And Utah, more than half of the land. It gets even bigger when you get to Nevada at almost 85%. Now let's look at New Jersey. It's just a tiny little dot there, which are probably Army bases and such. But here it's going to be a combination of Indian reservations, national parks, wilderness areas, national forests, Bureau of Reclamation Land, Bureau of Land Management. I mean, it's like an alphabet soup of federal agencies that are going to control a large part of most of the Western states. So I wanted to just throw that into you. I like this little tiny Texas over here. That's very interesting. Okay, so let's see what we've got as far as some of the federal lands. So in looking at Utah, this is just looking at national parks, national monuments, but you can see that there is a huge concentration of them down in the south. So Moab, which is one of the meccas for people who are coming to the state, is kind of south central, and Arches is right near it. Canyonlands is right in the area of Moab as well, as is Glen Canyon, a national recreation area. It's not really a national park, but that says there. Grand Staircase that I mentioned before is over here. And then further to the east is Capitol Reef, Bryce Canyon, and Zion. One of the fantastic things is that you can, in not that without that much effort, you can cover lots of these parks in, not that much time. You don't have that much driving to do, so you can really concentrate instead on seeing the parks, which I think is a lovely thing. Um, Stop me again if anything comes up, if you have any questions about anything that you're seeing here. And by the way, I'm noticing this interesting little thing over here. What is this? Can anyone just throw into the chat or just yell it out? What is this little blob up here? Yeah, that's the Great Salt Lake. So let's take a look at some interesting stuff that relates to the Great Salt Lake. And let's first even go further back. So I wanted to show you North America 70 million years ago. So 70 million years ago. And in terms of Utah, it's right at the cusp of this unbelievable situation that was occurring 70 million years ago when planet Earth was a lot warmer than it is now. There were no glaciers whatsoever. So because of that, uh, sea level was much higher than it is now. So at one point, 70 million years ago, when, by the way, Tyrannosaurus Rex would have been wandering throughout this part of our North America today, just on this side, by the way, um, there would have been this huge interior seaway. So one of the fascinating things about Utah is that we actually can find evidence of prehistoric fish. And we also have evidence of waterways coming through here that help to shape the land. And on the other hand, there are also land dinosaurs. So Utah is sort of like the smorgasbord of different types of dinosaurs, fossils that people can find. There are the land ones, but there are also the ones that lived in the ocean. So I wanted to just point out just how different things were at that time. Now let's fast forward a little bit. I just need to bring my chat down a little bit here. Okay. Now I want to go way into the closer to present time. That was 70 million years ago. Now we're looking at an image of the West from, I'm going to say this is about 20,000 years ago. So that is a long, long span of time. 70 million to 20,000. This is like almost present day compared to the 70 million. This is during the last ice age that affected North America. And that's why I wanted to bring up the Great Salt Lake before, because look at the size of this during the last ice age. For whatever reason, this part of the country was getting much more rainfall than it gets today. It was not semi-arid at that time. It actually was quite moist. It was quite rainy. So there were tremendous ice age lakes that today only are reflected in little tiny areas. So I have another map that is really clear with that. So here's the Great Salt Lake today. But during the last ice age, look how massive this was. This ice age lake actually extended down into southern Utah. Unbelievable. And then when the ice age ended and the climate was changing, it got warmer and it got drier. And that's what leaves us where we are today. But look at what was happening during the Ice Age. This is a glacier up here, which occasionally would have openings, would have breaks that would extend all the way to Alaska. That is going to enable the original Americans, the Native Americans, to come down through an opening in the glacier that would occasionally happen during the last Ice Age. And eventually they're going to make their way down throughout what would end up being the United States. Anybody have any questions on this? It's pretty crazy stuff when you think about these dry areas today and just how much water actually existed 20,000 years ago during the Ice Age. All right, let's go on. So I love this map. It's, I mean, suitable for framing as far as I'm concerned. It's a beautiful map that I happen to find someplace, and it's showing the different watersheds of the United States. And looking at our area, you probably can pick up on a few of them. The Hudson must be there, the Susquehanna, which is not too far away from where I am, et cetera, et cetera. They're over here. And this is the biggest of all in the United States. And I'm sure everybody can recognize what this watershed is. Look where it's emptying out into. New Orleans. This is the Mississippi watershed. Unbelievable how far it extends. Once we get past the Rockies, though, or once we get to the Rockies, there's going to be a different watershed, and water that accumulates or snow that accumulates in the Rockies, some of it actually is going to flow down towards New Orleans. But some of it, if it's on the other side of the Continental Divide, is going to flow down into the Colorado. So this is the lifeblood of that very dry region that we're focused on. The Colorado River, which begins in the Rockies in Colorado and also in the Rockies in Wyoming as another tributary called the Green River, they're going to go through some really tough dry terrain, and eventually these two stems are going to meet up in an absolutely spectacular area of Canyonlands National Park. Right over here is Canyonlands National Park, and people who are lucky enough, or I guess fit enough, to do the hike to the confluence, which is probably about a 5 mile, not too easy hike, they can see the two of the rivers meeting. Canyonlands is a very, very special national park. It is very close to Moab, just as Arches is, which is part of why Arches is such a popular place. It's about, I would say, about a 45-minute drive from Moab to get to some of the incredible features of one of the areas of Canyonlands National Park. So it's well worth it to go to Moab so that you can see two of the most incredible national parks very close to the town. Okay, let's take a look at some other stuff that I have here. So let's talk a little bit about Native Americans coming into this area. So I mentioned before that North America during the Ice Age was covered by a glacier that extended down to the northern fringes of today's border. Okay. But there were times where there was an opening between the glacier that formed over here and the bigger glacier that actually formed in Hudson Bay and extended out. Okay. That's going to enable Native Americans to keep moving down into this part of North America. And you can actually see that movement by looking at something as unlikely as language families. Who would think that? I mean, language families can tell you so much about where people have been and where they are now and who they're connected to. And we can even kind of date that based on, comparative languages and where people are and such. So what, as it turns out, if you look at this closely, you can see that there's a language family up here in Alaska and the Yukon, extending all the way through a large part of Canada, which is Athabascan. And then there's a break in between, and then there's Athabascan again down here. So what that tells me is that there were people up here that made their way into a variety of places, but their language was the one that really took hold here. Perhaps at one time it did here too, but then other people came in and kind of dominated, and that was the end of it. But here they are down here as well. The people that were the original Native Americans, or the ones that were able to effectively settle in the area, would have been of this language family, the Uto-Aztecan. And you can see that there's a large concentration here, and then they also extend into parts of Mexico as well. So it's again showing the movement, migration of people coming from, actually originally from Asia, coming across the land bridge and eventually making their way down here. So I thought this was pretty cool to take a look at, and just to kind of piece together these very slow movements that took place. And by the way, when does all of this happen? When can people start coming across and coming and slowly making their way down into what would be the US? 20,000 years ago. So before that, it doesn't seem that the land bridge really was uh, reliable enough that really would have brought the migrations over, but it is happening 20,000 years ago. Okay, so let's go on. Stop me if anything comes up, if you have any questions on any of this stuff. So let's talk a little bit about how the native people of all of North America, but particularly in Utah, were able to manage in what was going to become a very harsh, dry environment. And it is because of this incredibly resilient crop called maize. And maize is beginning in the middle of Mexico, and it's spreading out in many different directions. And one of the incredible things is that maize is so resilient, it's so hardy, that it can adapt to just about anything that the Americas throw at it. So maize is going to make its way up to the area that we're looking at, in addition, of course, to our neck of the woods in the east. So whether it's a rainier area or a drier area, it adapted and people could make use of it. So after the ice age is over, people are going to settle down in Utah taking advantage of maize. And that's going to be several thousand years ago that that's going to occur. And there's a system which you may have heard of called the Three Sisters, which is corn, beans, and squash. And they would be planted together. And each crop would help the other by fertilizing the soil, by having this stem for, or this stalk for the beans to grow on. I mean, everything worked with everything else. Shade was given so that the soil wouldn't dry out. It's just an amazing complex that Native Americans adapted to the environments that they were living in. And so today we see that there are granaries. There are places where people were storing the grain throughout Utah from thousands of years ago. And this one is in Glen Canyon, which is a very well-known area for a whole bunch of reasons. There was a huge environmental controversy that took place there in the 1960s. It's also a place where an explorer by the name of John Wesley Powell in the 1860s came through the Colorado and was, as far as we know, the first person to gaze upon some of the areas in southern Utah, because this was not a very populated place. It was quite inhospitable. The Colorado River has really fierce rapids going through parts of this area. So this guy braved it, and he seems to be one of the first to take note of things like these granaries that existed, that still exist in some parts of southern Utah. I say still exist in some cases because the amazing thing is that unfortunately parts of Glen Canyon would end up being damped. And so some of these are going to get inundated with water. So that's another story that hopefully we'll get to as we keep going along with all this. Anybody have questions so far? Okay, everyone is content? I'm content, that's fine. But if anything comes up, please let me know. All right, so let's see what else we have here. So who's settling in the area by in southern Utah? It's primarily the Fremont Indians. This is a name that we give to them of a group of Indians that seem to have lots of similarity in language and culture and the types of pottery that they created and so on. So the Fremont are going to be in this Four Corners area and extending up to the lake. All right. And in general, let's take a look. So the Fremont would have been part of this complex of Ute, Paiute, and Shoshone that are in parts of Utah. All right. So we talked about that. I'm going to keep going on. So the Fremont petroglyphs panel that's in Cottonwood Canyon, which is north of Moab, gives us, a glimpse of their artistry and the animals that they're hunting, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a human. It kind of looks like an alien. I don't think anyone really knows why these were drawn the way they were, but there are lots of them in the petroglyphs in southern Utah. And here's a hunter who has his bow and arrow and stuff. So this stuff is absolutely amazing to see if you haven't had a chance to. Other stuff which is incredible are the networks of trade routes that we know existed for thousands of years in North America. And, just when we think people kind of lived in their own little wilderness area without much contact from others, that's not what people do. They're always going to find ways to interact and such. And so I wanted to show you some of the extensive trade routes that existed. And I'm looking for Utah on here. Now, notice there are not going to be a lot of people by the Colorado River because this is a really harsh area. So there are going to be some Native American settlements, but not that many. They're going to be in the more, hospitable parts of North America. Okay, so let's bring it a little bit more to modern times. And now let's see where the Europeans come in on the act and how that relates to North America and West. So I love this map. It's the Wald-Seymour map. It actually is displayed in the Library of Congress in Washington. The original of it, whoops, I don't know how that happened. Let me go back. Okay. It was made in 1507, and one of the things that makes this map really special, you can't see it on here, but the cartographer put the word America on here, which is the very first time that a world map labeled America as a distinct place with its name. And there it is down here. And if we go northward, I am looking at our part of America. So this would be South America. Here we are in North America. Not too much of it is filled in 1507, as you can see. There's a lot of work to be done. So let's see how things develop. This is 1551, and this is a very well-known German cartographer by the name of Sebastian Munster. And let's see what North America is looking like at that point. It is taking shape. I mean, we can all be, Monday morning quarterbacks now and say, oh my goodness, look at this. But compared to the other map, this is really starting to take shape. And especially the eastern part by the Caribbean, Florida, and so on. But I'm gazing to the west and I'm seeing a lot of sort of terra incognita going on here. And now it's 1639 and it continues. It is just a big blank. There's not any detail at all. It looks like the Colorado is starting to be known to a certain degree and so on. But once you go north of Mexico, it's just a big question mark. And that will continue into 1685. So, there's a lot of exploration that's going to need to be done to bring the detail that exists in the East to this area. And let's see what happens. So in the 1680s, let's look at the northern frontier of New Spain. So the center of New Spain is going to be Mexico City. And Mexico City, from there will be roads that, extend out to different outposts and such. And one of the real frontier outposts will be Santa Fe, New Mexico, of course. And so this is the northern fringe of Spanish domain in this period. What will start to happen, though, and you can see the dates over here in the 1770s in some cases, is the Spaniards make their way to the Pacific coast and they start setting up missions. Aha. So let's see what happens and how that affects Utah. And by the way, the Spaniards never really effectively settled Utah. And that's why most of Utah doesn't have Spanish names today, the way Arizona, parts of Nevada, etc. do. There was no real Spanish settlement in parts of Utah. So in any case, it's the 1770s, and the Spaniards in Mexico City say, you know what? We need to find a route that will take us from Santa Fe to some of our outposts over here. And there was a new outpost called Monterey. It was mainly a military outpost, a presidio, and they wanted to find a route that would bring priests and others from Santa Fe to Monterey. So let's see what happens. The Escalante expedition is going to set out into the frontier. I cannot even imagine what that could have been like to be in areas that the Spaniards had really never been. They're going into real terra incognita. And in 1776, just when in the East Coast we have all of our stuff going on with the colonies and such, imagine what's going on in the West. There's a whole other dominion, a whole other world that is probably aware of the British, but they're also trying to stake claim of their part of North America. And the amazing thing is that this expedition that was trying to get from Santa Fe to Monterey, we actually see physical presence of it, some graffiti. The Escalante expedition wrote that they passed by this area in Año 1776. And the crazy thing is that we have some modern graffiti right in the same area. But if we get rid of Rob and Kathleen's writings over here, here it is from 1776. And this was found outside of Phoenix. So we know that they passed through that area. So let's take a look at where the Escalante expedition went. This is a Native American guide that they had hired to go through these vast unknown territories, particularly in Utah. They spent a lot of time in Utah. And by the way, if you're interested, this is a fantastic way to, really get a sense of this expedition. This is a primary source. This is their description of what they saw along the way in 1776 in Utah, the Four Corners region, and so on. And I have the route over here. So they're going from Santa Fe, and they're going through just about to where the Utah line is today. And when they're going up through this part of Colorado, they see mountains that were white on top, and they assumed that it had to be salt because it was too late in the year, in the summer, for it to actually be snow. But in reality, and that's why, by the way, it has the name the La Salle Mountains. The expedition named them the La Salle Mountains, thinking there was salt on top. But we now know that, yeah, the La Salle Mountains can have snow well into July. The La Salle Mountains actually are the mountains you would see if you're in Arches National Park or Canyonlands and you look eastward. They're a beautiful mountain range, a small and beautiful mountain range in the backdrop, and they will have snow for most of the year. So the Escalante expedition is going to come through here. They're going to get up to almost where the Great Salt Lake is, and notice what they end up doing. Once they get down here, they say, We're turning around. No more of this. This same area would be where today Interstate 70 also just goes up and down and no longer goes across. It is just too harsh to do that. So, you know, they could have been highway planners, apparently, because they knew exactly what they needed to do here. They turned around and they went down north of the Grand Canyon. Fortunately, they found a pass right where Glen Canyon is, the place that we call Glen Canyon is today. And there also were writings here that show that they passed through the area and then back they went to Santa Fe. So they did not make it to Monterey. And again, it gives you, you know, the sense of just how difficult this terrain is. No great surprise that right through this area is the very last part of the continental US, the 48 states, to be mapped. Right in here is where Grand Staircase Escalante is. So interesting how the past meets up with the present in really speaking of the same difficulties that people would have today. Okay, and this is what the La Salle Mountains look like. This is what Escalante and his expedition would have seen, but from the Colorado side, on the other side. This is a view from Arches. And it just makes the area even more beautiful because you have these magnificent, uh, you know, geologic wonders. And then in the background are snow-covered mountains. Who could ask for more? This is amazing. All right, let's see what we have here. Every now and then it's good to show a map just so we see where we are again. Again, here's the confluence of the Green River and the Colorado. Canyonlands National Park would be right here, and Moab would be right over here. So it's right in that general area. Okay, let's see what else. Lee's Ferry. All right, we're going to talk about Lee's Ferry a little bit. So why don't we start doing that? But I first want to show you what the Colorado was doing. So the green and the Colorado meet over here. And then the Colorado is going to eventually go through the Grand Canyon. And then it's going to make its way down to the Gulf of California. And that also serves as the border, I believe, between California and Arizona. But if I'm wrong, somebody just shout that out and tell me. But I'm pretty sure it's the border between California and Arizona. Okay. All right, here's St. George, by the way, which I talked about before. This is the Mormon temple, which is going to be prominent in most Utah towns. It's almost always going to be the highest building that you'll find in some of the smaller settlements. And you can see from this is you know, a lot of new construction and such. The scenery in the background, unbelievable. I mean, it's just a spectacular area about 45 minutes from Zion National Park. Okay, and I see the golf course over here as well. So yeah, lots of resorty, retirement, and other people coming into St. George. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about St. George and what happened there in the 1800s. So this is going back to the 1850s. So St. George is pretty close to the Colorado. It's actually also very close to a river called the Virgin River. The Virgin River is the river that runs through Zion National Park. A little bit north um, of St. George is a place called Mountain Meadow. And what happens there is tragic. It's in the 1850s, and Mormons that have escaped persecution in the East um, are settling in Utah, especially in the Great Salt Valley. And some of them are starting to also settle down here, but they have a huge amount of paranoia about the federal government because the federal government has been hounding them and has made it very difficult for them. People in the United States are not happy about polygamy, et cetera. That is a practice of Mormons at that time. So there's this paranoia going on that the federal government is coming after them. They settle in this no man's land, Utah, which was not US territory. If anything, it was still Spanish territory, but the Spaniards, as I had mentioned, were not involved. They were not up there. So they kind of had it for the taking for a little bit of time. So people are settling in St. George. Mormons are settling there. They're dealing with the Paiute Indians that live in the area. And they're very suspicious of any travelers coming through. There's a group coming from Tennessee, I believe. They're coming from this, maybe Arkansas, Tennessee or Arkansas, people coming from the South who are making their way across this area to get to farmland in California. So this is the 1840s, 50s. There's a lot of westward movement going on at that time. So they're very suspicious of these people, and they decide to make a horrible decision that they're going to massacre the entire group except for the smallest children as they come through. And their Native American allies work with them in mass, both of them will massacre men, women, and children. And this is known today as the Mountain Meadows Massacre. And it has implications for one particular individual by the name of John D. Lee. John D. Lee is accused of being the mastermind of the massacre. The federal government is going to hunt him down until they find him in a place that he named the Lonely Dell. And you can go to the Lonely Dell today to see some of the buildings that remain. The Lonely Dell is right by a tributary of the Colorado called the Paria River. It's right at the Arizona-Utah border. This is in Arizona, but Utah is, a mile away. So you can go here and see where he escaped to and where he ended up being caught. And one of the other interesting things about this, well, there's a bunch of interesting things. One is that there was a senator, I believe he still is a senator from Utah. His last name is Lee. His name is Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee. And he is a direct descendant of John D. Lee. John D. Lee had many wives, he had many children. So, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be his descendant. And Mike Lee, who is a senator today, is connected to this guy from, 1850. Another interesting thing is that while he was living in this area, he developed a ferry service because this was one of the only places before the Colorado was going to enter the Grand Canyon for people to be able to cross the Colorado River. So he created a ferry, and today it's called Lee's Ferry. There's no ferry service there anymore, but the place is called Lee's Ferry, and it's spectacular to go there. This is what it looks like. As you continue on just a little bit, you enter the beginnings of the Grand Canyon in an area called Marble Canyon. So this is going to continue to flow into Arizona, and you make it into the Grand Canyon. Lots of rafting trips that are going to go onto the Colorado into the Grand Canyon start at Lee's Ferry. So we drove there just to see, wanted to see the area and sort of get a sense of things. And it was really cool because there were lots of people heading out on rafts to go into the Grand Canyon. And we also learned something of the history of John D. Lee and some of the horrible, horrible situations and conflicts that occurred between the Mormon settlers and the federal government. Okay, anybody have any questions? Because I'm doing a lot of talking, and you guys are more than welcome to throw something out there if you have. Okay, let me keep my chat down where I can see if anybody. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And if you have anything you want to add, I love to hear from people. Absolutely love it. Okay, let's cross over from Lee's Ferry. Maybe I'm going to say as the crow flies 10 miles north, and we're going to be at Lake Powell. It's right at the Arizona-Utah border. I like this picture. It's pretty cool, isn't it? And it's showing Lake Powell at a drier time when you can see the water level has dropped down. And the way things go in the West, maybe all over, is that everyone is always on the verge of, panic. Like, this is it. This is the end of everything. this drought is going to continue and soon there will be no water stored here anymore. Okay. But then what ended up happening was last year it was so snowy that it bounced back. And that's what seems to happen, if we look at things in the long term in the West. Rainfall, like any place else, is going to be variable. And just so people think that this lake is going to be gone, it does bounce back. And it seems like right now it's at a much higher level because of all of the snowpack from last year and the year before. But anyway, Lake Powell. This isn't really a lake. This is actually a reservoir. So let's talk a little bit about this situation. And by the way, the Dominguez Escalante expedition that I mentioned before, 1776, it passed right through here. It probably walked right by where John D. Lee is going to hide out about 100 years later. And by the way, if you think about it, 1776, Spaniards are coming through this open, unknown terra incognita. And by the mid 1800s, it's already seeing more and more European, Anglo settlement starting to happen. So changes are definitely underway in that 100 years. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on. So this is a reservoir, and let's see. So I'm going to zero in over here for a moment and mention this town called Page. Page did not exist until the 1950s. Page was on Navajo land that the government purchased from the Indians in the area. This was basically a work camp in order to build what we today call, I'm looking to see if it's here. Yep, Glen Canyon. So, I'm sorry, Glen Canyon Dam. Glen Canyon Dam was a huge controversy in the 50s and the 60s. And the story goes like this. I'm looking to see if I have all of my landmarks here, and I do. Okay. The Colorado River is coming from this direction, right? Where the Rockies are in Colorado. And we had mentioned the Green River is a very important tributary. The Colorado River, by the way, easily could have been named the Colorado River, and we could say that this is the beginning. They're both really important and both give about the same volume of water. But in any case, the Green River is starting up here in the mountains, and it runs through this place called Dinosaur National Monument. Dinosaur National Monument was the perfect place, as far as the government was concerned, to construct a dam. Because the idea was, if they could back up the water over here, it's going to give the northern part of this region water storage, and perhaps that will stimulate population and development, because there sure wasn't very much. So the federal government said, yeah, we don't care that it's a national monument. We're going to have some exception going on, and we're going to build a dam. Okay. Well, people in San Francisco, way out over there, in the Sierra Club, got wind of that, and they quickly got over to Dinosaur and said, wait a minute, this is a national monument. Don't you dare. You cannot do that. And there was a huge battle that went on, and eventually they were able to protect Dinosaur National Monument from getting dammed. They said, you can't do that. This is preserved land. What do you think you're doing? So the federal government said, okay, you're right. We shouldn't be doing that, and especially in a national monument. What we'll do instead is we're going to make a dam down here in this completely unknown area. We'll use a reservoir for water storage, and we hopefully can help this area to develop. We can use it for hydropower so that places like Phoenix and Tucson can get electricity and air conditioning and all that. And we can also use it for flood control, because the Colorado had been a raging mess for people in, it's flooding, as most rivers will do. Okay. So the people from San Francisco were not at all aware of this area because it was so isolated. There were no settlements, there were no roads. So they said, that seems like a fair deal. We're going to save this area and we'll sacrifice this area. Okay. So it was only after the fact that they realized, uh-oh, we did something we probably shouldn't have done. That was a real devil's bargain. And we gave away, um, hold on one sec. We gave away a spectacular area that nobody knew. In fact, a book was written afterwards called The Land That Nobody Knew. And so today, the Glen Canyon Dam is is creating what we call Lake Powell. And I'll show you a picture of the dam over here. And here is the water storage down back there. And there have been many, many dams created on the Colorado River. Glen Canyon is further north, but we all have heard of Hoover Dam. That was actually built before. That was built in the 30s and so on and so forth. So the Colorado is, you know, a spectacular river, but it's also used kind of as plumbing. It's used as for many, many purposes for people in the Southwest. And the controversy lives on with Glen Canyon Dam as to, you know, there are always people who are saying, can we get rid of this? Can we maybe figure out another way for Phoenix and Tucson to get their power, et cetera, et cetera. But I would be amazed if that actually ever happens. All right, so let's see what I missed here. So as far as Glen Canyon is concerned, John Wesley Powell, he is a professor from Illinois, post-Civil War. He wants to be the one to go down the Colorado River to its to it, not its mouth all the way in Mexico, but to get down to the area today where Hoover Dam is. So basically, he wants to go through the Grand Canyon, and he's going to start off in on the Green River in Wyoming. And let's see what he's going to do. So he's starting up here, and he is going to name all of these places along the way. He's going to make his way to the confluence of the Colorado and the Green in today's Canyonlands National Park. And he's going to continue on until he makes it to this area. Unbelievable. His expedition, as far as we know, as I mentioned before, is probably the first that we know of to ever do this. So some of that big unknown that we were looking at earlier on those maps, it's finally going to start to be filled in. And if you think about this in terms of years and exploration and such, Lewis and Clark expedition is going to go through this part of what will be the US eventually, basically right through a little bit north, like around here. And that's going to be in 1903, 1904. It's not going to be until after the Civil War that this part of the country is going to start to be known. And a lot of it is because of John Wesley Powell. The other thing I want to mention, and you can't see it from this picture, but he only had one arm because he had been in the Civil War. And so we know what happened to a lot of people who had injuries. He was an amputee. So this guy and about 30 other men are going to go in these boats, wooden boats, not flexible rafts like what we have today, and brave the complete unknown. They had no idea if they were going to make it or not. They went on some of the wildest rapids that exist on the Colorado. He had one arm doing this. So it's a pretty wild story, and it really did help to, you know, shed light onto some of these really, you know, difficult and unknown parts of the United States. Who is that a picture with? Well, he was working with the Paiute Indians they worked as guides to a certain degree to kind of, you know, help him to know, go here, go there. They weren't on the expedition, but he did work with them in order to get some insight as to what to do, similar to what the Dominguez Escalante expedition did. They would use Indian guides, Indian scouts, to give them some clue as to, some travel tips, kind of like what we were doing before with Highway 191, et cetera. That's pretty much what was going on there. But actually, a tragic story will occur. I'm looking for where that is. So in the Grand Canyon, just about over here, kind of midsection Grand Canyon, there's some horrific rapids that they were going to have to pass. And one of them today we call Separation Rapids. And it was called that because um, it was so dangerous that three of the men decided that they didn't want to go any further. They said, we're not going any further. This is just going to be too much. We don't think you're going to make it through. So they left the expedition. They had to climb out of Grand Canyon. So they had to kind of, find some sort of trail and climb out from the bottom. I mean, that's even difficult today when we have these established trails. They had to basically forge their own trail. But that's how dangerous the Colorado was. They didn't want to do it. So as they're leaving, that's when the rest of the expedition are ready to try to do the rapid, to try and pass the rapid. After some difficulty, they make it through. So they shot their gun up in the air to let them know, we made it through, come back. It's okay. Don't try and go up to the top of the canyon. That's crazy. They never heard from them again. And as the story goes, speaking of the Paiute and such, what probably happened was they were mistaken by the Paiute that lived above the Grand Canyon for other people who had attacked some women, Paiute women. And so they were very likely murdered. So that is just one of the unbelievable tales of what, of what happened during the voyage of John Wesley Powell on the Colorado. Okay, so let's look at a couple of other things here. All right, so we looked at this map already. Let's see what else we have. So we looked at Glen Canyon, and these are these are the Nemesis twins here. So this is Floyd Dominy. He was the head of the Bureau of Reclamation. He was the one who was dead set about building a dam, whether it be in Dinosaur National Monument or in Glen Canyon. And this guy, David Brower, was somebody involved in the Sierra Club. And so they were battling with each other. And, no great surprise, somehow the federal government got the upper hand here and they lost out, unfortunately. So the dam was built in Glen Canyon after much wrangling and such. Okay, and just some other views of the area by Glen Canyon Dam. This is Horseshoe Bend right outside. So let's see, the dam would be just over there a little bit. And I mean, the picture speaks for itself. And this is in Page, which was a work town and now is the place where people stay when they want to visit the area. And I like this view because it shows even today just what this area is like. And imagine it in the 1950s, it didn't even have this road. It was just red rock and deep canyons down here. That's what John Wesley Powell would have seen as he was coming through here, and what the Escalante expedition would have seen as they came through here in the 1700s. Okay. So some of the problems with the dam, I mean, there are benefits for sure. It enables Phoenix to have air conditioning and to have electricity because of the hydropower that's created by the dams. But some of the negative aspects are that it changes the environment of the Colorado downstream. So in the Grand Canyon, there are many native fishes that are having real trouble because a dam, I'm going to go back a little bit, when you have water stored in a dam, it's going to be deep and cold. So when the water is released to create the electricity and the turbines that exist in here and then comes through, it's much colder than what you would typically find. And so a lot of the native, aquatic life is having trouble. And so, these are some of the the unintended consequences of changing the environment as drastically as people did back in the 50s and 60s. I don't think that would happen today, but in the 50s and 60s, that was a time of, gung-ho, you know, dam building and all that. So that's what we have going on now. And we had already talked about how there are ancient ruins that ended up being inundated as well as the water level expanded. Okay, and another thing that actually ended up being surrounded by water is this spectacular place called Rainbow Bridge in Rainbow Bridge National Monument. This is in the area of Glen Canyon, and the water is because of Lake Powell. It would not have existed like this. It would have been all land before the dam. So it certainly did lead to some pretty intense changes that took place. Okay, so Kanab, let's see. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Kanab. So I mentioned it a bit before. Kanab is located, I'll get back to that one. Let's see where it is. Kanab is over here. Zion National Park would be over here, St. George would be here, and Las Vegas would be here. So Kanab to Las Vegas, 2.5 hours. It's not really that far away. The Grand Canyon is right down here. Here's Page, which is where Lake Powell and Glen Canyon Dam are. And Moab would be, getting my bearings for a second, Moab would be off the map, but it would be about over here. Okay, and Bryce Canyon would be, again, I'm getting my bearings for a second here. Escalante. Bryce Canyon would be about over here, just so kind of get the lay of the land. All right, so Kanab. Kanab is right outside of Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. It is big. It is really big. It's probably bigger than Rhode Island. Maybe it would compete with Connecticut for all I know. It is really big. And it was Bill Clinton who decided to sign into law that this area would be protected. So here's the interesting thing. If you look carefully, you might see that this is not Grand Staircase and Escalante National Monument. This is the Grand Canyon. So Bill Clinton had to sign into law Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument at the Grand Canyon because of this. There was huge controversy in establishing this as a monument. And this is one of these interesting things to think about. When you don't live near the place, you have a different perspective sometimes than the people who actually live there. And these would be the locals living in Kanab. They did not want that area to be a monument because they're looking for jobs. They're looking to build their economy, and the area has a lot of very high grade coal, and people wanted jobs in mining. And suddenly, when this monument comes along, that's the end of that, type of job of that aspect of the economy. And people will say, yeah, well, but you can have tourism instead. But their argument was tourism is really variable. It's not a way that you can really build a community. People come in the summer and then they leave. So that these aren't steady jobs that people there can have. So I always find it interesting because sure, I love that these things exist, but here I am, 2,500 miles away, and it's not my livelihood. But when you look at the actual issues from the local perspective, people were so upset about this in that area that Clinton had to do this. He didn't want the controversy of signing this in Kanab. So I just wanted to bring that into the mix as well. Okay, and let's look quickly. We have a few minutes left. Let's look at Zion, which is very, very close to Grand Staircase, Escalante. And I love lodges. I love national park lodges, and this is one that is in Zion. Not every national park has a lodge, but the ones that do, oh, they're gems. Most of them were built, decades ago and have that very special charm. Okay, so Zion is close by to St. George and Kanab, kind of right in the middle. And let's see what we can find here. So some of the outstanding things in Zion are these tremendous monoliths that are all in an area that create some very dramatic valleys. And one of the great hikes you can do in Zion is called Angel's Landing. I've done this twice. I think I am too old to do it now. I think my Angel's Landing days are done. I may try it, but I don't think I'm going to be too successful because this is tough. This is a really, really tough hike. And part of it has these switchbacks. So these are actual switchbacks that will take you to a base. And then if you're crazy enough, I wasn't, and I wasn't going to let my kids do this either, but people will then hold on to chains to get up to the very, very top. So it is wild. But even getting to this point where you get to the switchbacks and then the base before this begins is well worth it if you're in really good shape. It's amazing. All right, and another view of the lodge and some other scenery. And there's a guy coming down from the chains, and yep, it's a long way down. Um, Therefore, my kids were not allowed to do this and never will be. They can be 40 years old, and I will still say you will not be doing this. Okay, another view at the top of Angel's Landing. And another famous hike in Zion is the Narrows, and this takes you on the Virgin River through these slot canyons. It can be very dangerous because flash floods can come through. So you have to get, you know, permission that day from the Park Service that it will be safe. Whoops. And I'm going to go a little bit more, and I just want to show you some pictures from Moab. So Moab, which we've been talking about the whole time, Moab is where the Green River and the Colorado meet. This is a very famous arch called Delicate Arch, and just some pictures of Moab. This is actually on 128 on the way to Moab. And here's the confluence that we've been talking about. This is the Colorado and this is the Green coming together in Canyonlands National Park. Amazing stuff. John Wesley Powell would have been on a wooden boat going through here, and the rapids would have been wild. This is Mesa Arch, one of the most famous arches. And you can't see it in the background, but the LaSalle Mountains would be back there. People will come here during sunrise, and the sun just kind of comes up and glimmers by the arch. It's just spectacular, you know. But if you get there at 5 in the morning in the summer, there will already be a cloud of people. Um, is there a way to see the river confluence without? Not that I know of. I think you have to do the hike. I don't think there are roads that go there. If there are, they might be four-wheel drive roads. So that's something to check into. I don't think there are roads that go there though. It's pretty wild country. And this is Moab. This is a view of Moab. And I wanted to show you a few other crazy things before we go. So if you're on Interstate 70 and you turn off to get to Moab by this sign, Cisco, you will go through a 99% ghost town. There are still some people living in this place. And here is the post office, but most of it is ghost town, real ghost town, not, like the fake amusement park types. It is really awesome to go this way into Moab. And I'm just going to show you a few more, even though I know we're running out of time. Some of the views from 128 going into Moab, it's outrageous. And this is why Moab gets, the visitation that it does. The place is super popular. There's 128. And I'm going to finish it off by showing you back to what we were saying in the beginning, that there are there's lots of evidence of dinosaurs throughout the Moab area. And along 128, you can pull off and see slabs like this. This is a huge rock slab. And guess what's right here? It's not in a museum. It's not behind a fence. It's literally right there. And you can get up close and personal with tremendous dinosaur prints. So it's just, That's why I use the word unparalleled. I'm gonna get out of the share screen. It is unparalleled. There's so much there. There's so much history. There's so much to see. It's mind-boggling. And amazingly and luckily, it's in our own country. It is easy to get there. We can fly to Salt Lake City, to Phoenix or Las Vegas pretty easily, and the roads are good, and it's going to get you right into that area. Does anyone have any questions on this? I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you start
Wonderful.
planning your routes. Oh, I'm sorry.
It was wonderful.
Thank you so much. If you have any questions on any of this, feel free to email me. I can help you with some of the travel ideas and such. Again, my email is Judy Okun, OKUN 1 @gmail.com. And I am delighted that we had a chance to get together today. Thank you so much. And hopefully you'll have a wonderful summer with lots of adventures. Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.